I used to watch Saw each and every Halloween. I even remember the old ads that would play that said, "If it's Halloween, it must be Saw." And oh yes, there will be blood. However, as much as I am a fan of the first Saw film, I'll be the first one to admit that every new entry into the franchise was worse than the one that came before, which is why the series went on a bit of a hiatus after Saw the final chapter. But it clearly wasn't the final chapter because Lionsgate tried to breathe new life into the franchise back in 2017 with Jigsaw. It wasn't that big of a hit though, so the studio is back to try and reinvent the series again. This time, series veteran Darren Lynn Bousman returns to direct a fresh pitch from Chris Rock, who is apparently a fan of the Saw films. Who would have guessed? In Spiral, brash detective Ezekiel Banks and his rookie partner take charge of a grisly investigation into a series of deaths that are eerily similar to Jigsaw's murder cases. However, this time around, the mysterious killer seems to be specifically targeting police officers. So the first thing I'll say about Spiral is that I do like it more than Jigsaw. And that's probably because Spiral feels separated enough from the original films that it doesn't get bogged down by the franchise's past. Anyone can watch Spiral without really needing to watch any of the Saw films. In fact, the movie feels like a thriller in the vein of Seven, more so than an actual Saw film itself. So I admire how the creative team behind this movie wanted to try something different, because the result is the first Saw film in history that actually has something to say. But its message is incredibly heavy-handed and on the nose. I agree that police reform in America is necessary, but this is not how you want to portray the way that people want to see that change. I know the serial killer in this movie is wrong for killing cops, but I'm pretty sure most conservative people will view a movie about someone killing police officers as liberal propaganda, and that's not gonna do anything to help inspire real and necessary change. But whatever. As I said, I admire the attempt to try something new with a Saw film, and I stand by that, even if the execution of including relevant social commentary did fall a little flat. And just like everyone else, I was surprised to learn that this idea came from Chris Rock, who also stars in this movie. I guess he wanted to branch out from his usual comedy shtick and flex his acting chops, and I totally respect that. Rock does deliver a decent performance, but I did feel like he was trying a little too hard to be taken seriously. I think Rock could have benefited from having a few more regular dramas under his belt before he dived into the horror thriller genre. Or maybe he could have had a smaller role in the film instead of leading it. But as I said, Rock is mostly fine in the film, and so is Samuel L. Jackson and the rest of the cast. Saw isn't really known for having great acting anyway, so despite having big names like Chris Rock and Sam Jackson, Spiral doesn't exactly break that trend. However, I will say that Chris Rock's character, Ezekiel Banks, is probably the first character in a Saw film that I was actively rooting for since Adam and Dr. Gordon in the original Saw. His character isn't fleshed out all that much and isn't too particularly interesting, but at least I know he's a pretty solid guy who tries to do the right thing whenever he can, even if that means getting shit for it. And that's more than I can say about any of the other protagonists in the Saw sequels. So I think Rock had the right idea to create a character that the audience could root for, because I actually found myself wanting to see Officer Banks succeed at finding this new serial killer instead of just getting caught in a jigsaw trap. You see, ever since Saw 2, characters in this franchise were specifically created to be disposable. They existed so that they could die horrible and horrific deaths. So, as an audience member, it was hard for me to care about any one character, especially when the filmmakers would give them fucked up and irredeemable personalities in order to justify killing them off. But Spiral, surprisingly, went in a different direction with Ezekiel, so I wouldn't mind seeing him again if Spiral ever did get a sequel. But speaking of death traps, I have to admit that I was underwhelmed by the ones in this movie. I did find myself squirming a bit at some of the gore, but that's about it. The traps themselves aren't really all that clever or memorable, and you can say the same thing about the movie as a whole. As an avid Saw fan, I'm aware of the fact that the film is going to twist in the third act, so I pay close attention to every little detail. And as a result, the surprise reveal near the end felt painfully obvious and underwhelming, which made the finale extremely anticlimactic. I understand there's only so much you can do with a whodunit narrative, but I was really disappointed with the reveal here. I mean, how many times are we going to learn that there's a new Jigsaw copycat running around? Is that really the only story that writers can come up with? To have the audience try and guess which character is the new Jigsaw in each and every new film? Do real-life serial killers even get copycats? I don't see anyone running around trying to copy the Zodiac Killer, so why is this any different? Because the real Jigsaw died in 2006 and the writers ran out of ideas since then? I think if Saw 4 through 8 never happened, then this movie would probably feel more refreshing. But since those films do exist, I can't help but compare this new movie to the previous installments. And despite feeling more like a police procedural, Spiral mostly feels like a rehash of the material that has come before. Maybe the movie would have been better received if it were an original thriller not associated with Saw in any way. I mean, it would have been pretty easy to swap out the Jigsaw traps here with regular murders, since, as I said, the traps aren't all that memorable anyway, so maybe the Saw canon and everything audiences have come to associate with the Saw franchise did end up bogging down Spiral in the end. Chris Rock's pitch was probably a step in the right direction for Saw's future, but the actual script and the execution of the story and its themes were all a bit lackluster. So Spiral probably won't be the franchise reinvention that Lionsgate and Saw fans were hoping for, because despite having some thematic differences, well-known actors, and a bigger budget, Spiral still feels like a typical Saw sequel. And because of that, I would likely give Spiral from the Book of Saw 2 3/4 out of 5 stars. Thanks for watching.